So far, at least 5 people have died in the storm. The toll also includes 2 men killed in separate incidents in Lenoir County. One lost his life while trying to plug in a generator. One city in crisis today is New Bern, North Carolina, which sits between the 2 rivers. Here, let's take you to this press conference right now with the governor of North Carolina.
Threat than when the storm was just offshore. I cannot overstate it. Flood waters are rising, and if you aren't watching for them, you are risking your life. I have several important warnings this morning. First, to the people who have evacuated, if you are safe, stay put. We know that people are anxious to get back home, but don't go back until this storm passes and you get the official all clear. Second, know that the water is rising fast everywhere, even in places that don't typically flood. This system is unloading epic amounts of rainfall, in some places measured in feet and not inches. Many people who think that the storm has missed them have yet to see its threat. Residents of Charlotte, Asheville, Fayetteville, Statesville, the southern Piedmont, the Sandhills, the mountains. Rivers will rise days after the rain has stopped. In the east, they will crest Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Remember, most storm deaths occur from drowning in fresh water, often in cars. Don't drive across standing or moving water. Emergency management is sharing flood projections with local officials. If they tell you to evacuate, please do so immediately. It could save your life. The storm has claimed numerous lives already. 5 deaths have been confirmed as related to the storm, and several others are under investigation. Loss of life is heartbreaking, and we'll continue to pray for the victims and their family. And every hour, first responders are preventing more deaths. We now have a little over 20,000 people in 157 shelters with room for more. If those shelters fill up, we will establish more shelters. More than 800,000 people throughout the state are currently without power, and utility crews are beginning to work now to restore electricity to people. Overnight and into this morning, more rescues are continuing across eastern North Carolina. We are so grateful to these rescue teams who risk their lives to save others, and they have come from all over the country to work with our local, state, and federal partners. Recovery teams are now ready with new authorization from FEMA. Last night, our major federal disaster declaration for an initial round of counties was approved. That authorizes immediate FEMA assistance in Beaufort, Brunswick, Carteret, Craven, New Hanover, Onslow, Pamlico, and Pender counties. We expect to add more counties, and we appreciate the quick turnaround by FEMA. I want to again warn residents of the mountains and the rest of North Carolina, especially the southern Piedmont. Heavy rain is predicted still. Fayetteville, west to Charlotte, and the mountains. Expect flooding and potential landslides beginning tonight and continuing into Monday. Some of the areas will be impacted that have rarely experienced any flooding. Get prepared and stay alert for forecast updates and emergency evacuation orders. Finally, please be safe and be smart. and use your common sense. Don't drive through water, no matter how confident you feel or how much you want to get out of the house. Roads are closed in many places, and more are closing even as we speak. Secretary Trogdon will inform you about those closings, but when you're out there, you are impeding emergency vehicles, you're impeding utility crews who are trying to restore power. So don't get out, particularly in southeastern North Carolina. Don't operate a generator indoors. Be alert for warnings and flash floods, tornadoes, high winds. And if you need non-emergency help, dial 211. Those using video relay services should dial 888-892-1162. And the Ready NC app has information about shelters. And I'm also grateful to have Monica McGee to provide American Sign Language interpretation for us. This storm eventually will leave our state. We in North Carolina have been through tough storms, and this one is sure testing us. But now is the time for us to persevere. I have never known North Carolinians to quit in the face of a challenge, and we're not about to start. And speaking of a team that never quits, I'd like to introduce to you some of our team who are working here at the Emergency Operations Center 24/7. They're working around the clock to keep North Carolina safe. I want to introduce to you, to my right, Eric Hooks, our Secretary of Public Safety. Beside him, Mike Sprayberry, our Director of Emergency Management. Beside him, Dr. Mandy Cohen, our Secretary of Department of Health and Human Resources. Then we have Secretary Jim Trogdon, our Secretary of Transportation. Colonel Glen Mcneil, the Commander of the North Carolina Highway Patrol. Major General Gregory Lusk of the North Carolina National Guard. Albie Lewis, our FEMA Federal Coordinating Officer, along with Gracia Check. And we have Commander Peggy Britton of the United States Coast Guard. And Major General Lusk will introduce Lieutenant General Jeffrey Buchanan of the United States Army, who is also with us. Now I'm going to turn it over to Director Sprayberry for an update.
Thank you, Governor. Good morning, everyone. The State Emergency Operations Center continues to operate at a level 1. The focus of the team is to surge operational and logistical resources to the impacted counties, which will now be a little bit easier since tropical storm force winds, for the most part, have exited the eastern part of our state. I want to first thank the local partners for their patience as we try to negotiate some of the dangerous roads that have been degraded and even have some debris. So it will take us a little bit of time as we work through those issues. We're also currently engaged in search and rescue operations by boat and by air. Thank you also to our Coast Guard partners. And we have our logistics teams really pushing those commodities out hard. Shelter operations continue to be a top priority for us, and we always want to thank our local partners as well as our universities for stepping up to assist in the sheltering of our fellow North Carolinians as they have sheltered from Hurricane Florence. We're also working with our federal partners to develop temporary housing strategies for this event as they transition from shelters to housing once we have that opportunity. I also want to remind everyone, as the state continues to experience unprecedented flooding along our coast, and we do anticipate more flooding as it continues to move inland, as the governor said, going west, we want to urge all of our residents to log into our flood inundation mapping and alert network, known as FIMAN, at fiman.nc.gov. That's FIMAN.nc.gov. Fiman.nc.gov. In that site, you can see what roads and structures will be affected by flooding. And users can also sign up to be alerted by this system by text or email when the rivers near you will begin to rise. As also, always, let's please make sure that you follow the guidance of your local officials, especially when it comes to reentry, and stay tuned to your local media for guidance so that you can ensure situational awareness. Thank you so much for your support of the North Carolina State Emergency Response Team. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, Director Sprayberry. We'll now hear from our Secretary of Health and Human Services, Dr. Mandy Cohen.
Thank you, Governor. Good morning. We are in close contact with hospitals and assisted living facilities in affected areas to assess their current status and encourage those that need assistance to contact their local emergency management officials. We continue to gather information from those facilities regarding their capabilities to deliver services related to staffing and power, food, water, and supplies. So continue to contact the local emergency management officials. In terms of medical shelters, we have 3 that are up in Goldsboro, Clayton, and High Point. All of them have bed availability, with most of the bed availability being in Clayton. And we are evaluating other medical shelter sites at this point. If someone does need to go to a medical shelter, please call local emergency management for a referral there. And then lastly, let me leave you with 3 safety tips. You continue to hear us say, please do not drive through standing or moving water. This was the #1 cause of death in Hurricane Matthew. Please, if you see standing water, don't drown, turn around. Second thing to remember is if you are using gas-powered generators, make sure you're not using those inside. The carbon monoxide from those could be poisonous. And then lastly, as we move through the next phases of the storm, make sure you are throwing away food that may have come into contact with flood or storm waters. Perishable foods that have not been refrigerated properly due to power outages may cause illness. When in doubt, throw it out. Be safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cohen. Now we have General Jim Trogdon, who is our Secretary of the Department of Transportation. Jim.
Thank you, Governor. Conditions across southern and eastern North Carolina continue to worsen in transportation. Currently, as of this morning, I-40 had to be closed between exit 364 and 369, which is the vicinity of Warsaw. We're working closely, and the Highway Patrol is out reviewing potential detour routes now. We are working to reestablish and establish those detour routes to support our emergency response to eastern North Carolina. There's numerous counties with numerous primary roads closed. Almost every county in eastern North Carolina has primary roads closed. Since yesterday, almost 12 hours ago, the number has doubled. So it was 30 yesterday. Today it is 60. Our efforts today will be focused in priority on these things: maintaining and establishing detours on our critical interstates and facilities to support emergency response, clearance of trees and debris in support of emergency response, pre-positioning assets to support future riverine flooding. We are using the products that Director Sprayberry mentioned to determine where we believe our closures will be coming up as flood events progress. And then we'll move to initial clearance of debris from all roadways. I would like to reinforce that roads open today may be closed by this afternoon, so things can change dynamically. I do anticipate tomorrow we'll have a significant increase in the number of roads covered with water. So do not travel east of I-95, south of US 70, because those conditions will be extremely hazardous now, will continue to get more hazardous, and those conditions will change rapidly. If you do travel throughout North Carolina, go to the drivenc.gov app. It has the latest information on where road closures, where detours are, and what the current conditions are in travel speed and other conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Trogdon. Now we'll have the commander of the North Carolina Highway Patrol, Colonel Glen Mcneil. Colonel Mcneil.
Thank you, Governor. Good morning. The State Highway Patrol and our DOT partners continue to work from the coast to the Piedmont, responding to help those affected by this storm. We continue to see our primary calls for service being trees and power lines blocking roadways, along with the obvious flash flooding of roads. Overnight, our troopers responded to 82 calls for service and 56 collisions within the affected portions of our state. I'm pleased to report of those calls for service and those collisions investigated that none resulted in a fatality. Incidents of downed power lines are being reported to utility companies and monitored to ensure that unsuspected drivers do not cross power lines. The heavy rains that are moving west will inherently bring with them the dangers that we've already faced in the sandhills to the eastern portions of our state. Motorists should avoid at all costs traveling through roads that we have closed. Don't drive around barricades, and again, as the governor has stated, do not drive through standing water or rushing water. We have no way of verifying that that road still remains under the rushing water. With the continued and spreading power outages, remember to treat all intersections that do not have power as a four-way stop. Continue to utilize drivenc.gov and avoid calling Star HP or 911 for roadway conditions. If you have to travel, please go to this website and verify the route that you plan to take. Because as Secretary Trogdon said, as the governor stated, the road that's open today may not be open tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel Mcneil. We'll now hear from Major General Greg Lusk, Commander of the North Carolina Highway Patrol. General?
Hey, good morning, and thank you very much, Governor Cooper. So there has not been any significant changes in the disposition of the National Guard forces that are out there arrayed across the entire state, from the east all the way to the mountains. The only changes, of course, obviously more have been employed in the various life-saving and rescue missions that are ongoing, particularly in the east. That will increase significantly as the storm continues to move west, and we will, I think, see an increase in the utilization and the application of some of these teams that we already have pre-positioned. It's important to note that while we have folks already pre-positioned and ready to respond all across the state, and we're talking about this historic flooding and impacts to the central and the southern parts of our state, from the sandhills to the Piedmont all the way to the mountains, that indeed, just rest assured, we have people ready to reinforce our local partners and our incident commanders that they'll surely be calling on them in the future. But it's also important to note that there is a significant amount of resources that are lined up around us, primarily through our Department of Defense and all of our partners. They're lining up aviation assets and some of their high water vehicles to help that have fording capabilities, so that indeed we can get into some of these stricken areas. Yesterday I talked about the joint task force that we stood up under the command and control of our dual status commander, Major General Jim Ernst. And he's over there working with his crew to help coordinate and make sure that we indeed have that command and control and that coordination in place, so that we can bring those capabilities to bear once the storm passes and conditions allow. But helping him, I'm very happy to have Lieutenant General Jeff Buchanan here with us, Joint Forces Land Component Commander, the Department of Defense lead agency, if you will, here to help us, and he's here to kind of oversee that, ensure that we have that everything the Department of Defense has to offer for the state and the people of North Carolina, that it's indeed at our disposal. So, sir, we're very glad to have you here today, and thank you.
Thank you, General. We're going to need all these resources to respond and recover from this storm. And I'm going to emphasize one more time, you heard the report from Secretary Trogdon and from the commander of the Highway Patrol. Those who've evacuated east may want to go back home right now. In many ways, conditions are getting worse in the middle eastern to southeastern North Carolina because of the significant flooding. Travel conditions in many ways are getting worse. And when you go back home, then you're getting in the way of emergency responders, relief efforts, utility crews, particularly as we're having a difficult time finding routes to the areas that need help. So we ask you to stay off the road. People of North Carolina have been pretty good about that. We're going to ask you to continue. And we also are getting a lot of calls from people who want to help. We're grateful to the American Red Cross and for our faith-based groups and our nonprofits that are helping out. If you want to contribute, you can go online to governor.nc.gov or text Florence to 20222. This relief fund is available to people in North Carolina who need the help. Our whole team now will open it up for questions that you might have.
Thank you. Gary Robertson, AP. I was wondering, Governor, if you or Mike could talk about more specifics about this weekend and the places that you are most concerned about regarding historic flooding.
Mike, I'll let you. It's so many places right now that we are concerned. Looking at that flood map today, we have rivers that are rising, the Neuse, the Cape Fear, the Lumber River, all across. Mike, I'll let you address specifically.
Thank you, sir. And so the governor's right on target, as you may imagine. That's we're looking at places like Lumberton and Robeson County. We're looking at Fayetteville and Cumberland County. We're looking at Lenoir County. As the storm moves west and it drops these incredibly high amounts of precipitation, there's going to be widespread flooding. We've called more assets in to prepare ourselves for flooding in the mountains. So it's going to be basically anything, I would say, from the mountains to the coast, from North Carolina, South Carolina border up to around Harnett County. We're seeing significant amounts of rainfall. So we are positioning ourselves with all of our assets to make sure that we can provide an aggressive and decisive response to that amount of rain.
Hey, Mike, give them the fireman information again, because that's a place where you can go and look for all of these rivers.
So fiman.nc.gov. That's FIMAN.nc.gov.
Just one follow-up, particularly about we see the graphs about Manchester and northern Cumberland County. It seems like not just historic but epic. Is there any special concern about that area?
There is a special concern, and I've been in communication with the assistant county manager from Cumberland County this morning, and he's telling me that they're eyes wide open and they're doing everything they can to make sure that they're prepared.
Amy Elliott with Spectrum News. I know the last couple of days we've talked about the high concentration of swift water rescues in the New Bern area. I know you said there have been more of those. Are we still seeing that in New Bern, or are we seeing that in other places now as well?
Mike, I'll let you take that.
Yes, sir. So we are not just in New Bern, but places like Carteret, and you will see that all up and down the coastline here. And again, as the storm moves west, we anticipate we'll be seeing more of those types of rescues. I'd like to publicly thank Commander Peggy Britton and her team. They've been doing aviation rescues. I think, ma'am, you said that there were 18 rescues?
23 as of this minute.
Okay, 23.
Elderly person, an infant, and a dog.
And so there we go. Thank you, ma'am.
Andrea Blanford, ABC 11. Governor, we're talking about the track of this storm shifting west, and you're concerned about mudslides, landslides, things like that. What's your message to people who might want to or need to evacuate out in the western part of our state?
Avoid complacency. A lot of people believe that since this storm has now been downgraded to a tropical storm and then a tropical depression, and then it will be a low pressure area, that they don't have much to worry about. The rainfall is epic and will continue to be. And particularly along the Sandhills to Charlotte, we're going to see areas flood that have not flooded before. And so you'll have people who really aren't paying attention to this. I have a real concern about that. So we are telling people to go to the Fiman map to look, to be aware of local evacuation orders that may come their way, and to be on their toes. and this goes to the people of Western North Carolina. People in Western North Carolina know what heavy rains mean. They have experienced rock slides and mudslides and road closures and damage before, so they know. They're all out there. How many counties do we have setting up EOCs? 62? 89 emergency operations centers right now. So almost all of North Carolina is on the ready for this. And we just don't want people to think this thing is over, because it's not. It's not over really anywhere, because even as the storm passes eastern North Carolina, those rivers are going to continue to rise over the next few days, and there's going to be significant flooding.
Travis Van, WRL. You mentioned the closure at I-40 and the difficulty of finding routes. Can you speak to how many resources you're unable to get where they need to go, and what sort of impact that's happening, that's causing, like how many boats and other resources that you're unable to move out where you need them?
Mike, you want to take that one?
So before we send any resources out, first of all, we've got a tremendous amount of resources staged in Kinston. They're already there. And we've also got a lot of resources chopped out to the counties already. They're already in operation. So basically, they're already in the area of operation, and before any other additional assets would be moved, we coordinate with our DOT partners who are right here, and we're also looking at our firemen to make sure that we know where the floods are, so we understand. As you might imagine, when we send resources out, we get us a route before we go, so that we ensure that we're headed in the right direction. Although, could be debris, so we have, chainsaw crews with most of the resources that go out too. I do.
We're really grateful for this joint operation, because they're providing high water vehicles that can help us deliver those supplies even in flooded areas. So that's a very important part of this operation.
Joe Rennison with the Financial Times. Can you speak to the current situation with coal ash ponds, agricultural lagoons, things like that? Is there any risk to flooding of those lagoons? What level are they at the moment? Those sorts of things.
With epic flooding, you're going to have risk of flooding those infrastructures. Yes, we're concerned about it. We have our Department of Environmental Quality that is on the ready, in addition to our Environmental Protection Agency partners that are here. Do you have any? I don't think we have any reports of any yet, no. Other questions? Okay, we'll let you know when the next briefing will be. Thank you very much.
There you heard officials reiterating a lot of the concerns that we've heard throughout the day, particularly about flooding. They said the threat has not gone away, and their biggest concern is flooding. Also, once again, urging people to stay off the roads. They're telling people, don't drown, turn around. But they said if you have to, for some reason, be on the roads, they said please avoid any standing or moving water. In fact, they can't even guarantee you that the road that was once there is still there. Now, they were asked actually to identify a specific location where they were especially worried about flooding, and there in North Carolina, they couldn't even narrow it down. They said they were extremely concerned about flash flooding over the next several days across the state. Now, we're going to take a quick break and return with more coverage of Tropical Storm Florence. You're streaming CBSN, always on.